Hey everybody, welcome to the live version of Reaper ToolBox. I am Ann Forster, and today we are going to be continuing in our epic painting of Julie Guthrie's fantastic dragon duel, The Dance of Death. How's it going, guys? I'm getting ready. I'm getting the gigantic, Dance of Death out of the way and getting my little dragon ready for camera. There he is. Remember him? Mr. Black Dragon. Mr. Black Non-Black. Non-Black Black Dragon, right? Because he's not all black. There he is, making sure he looks like he's in focus. Yeah, he looks good. Awesome. Are you guys ready to paint some scales today? I even have like an outline that I wanted to talk about for dragon painting and for well, specifically actually for dragon painting. So talking about this, guys, many of you may have noticed he is not completely constructed. Looking. Yes, well, Dance of Death. Well, Nebulosity, you get your wish. I also like to see projects get finished, but I'm going to have to talk Ron and Ed into a lot of extra painting time to make sure that I can finish this one, because I think they're probably not going to want me to take all the hours to finish it on camera. I could be wrong, though. At any rate, let's talk about painting large models in general and when you put pieces together and when you don't, because I get this question a lot. Especially with people who've never painted a large model before. And they're always like, well, should I put the wings on and then paint it? Or should I not put the wings on and paint it later? So essentially what I do is I will dry fit everything. And I will kind of make a judgment call on, if I attach this, can I easily reach everything to paint it? And that's not just can I easily reach the wings, but can I easily reach the back of the dragon between the wings? If the wings are on, the answer to that is usually no. And once the wings are attached, is it going to be really, really a pain in the butt to do things like, painting the belly? Because then you're holding it, by its wings and it's way up here, So answering questions like that can help you to figure out, do I want to attach this first? For me with wings, the answer is pretty much always no, because I would rather be able to lay the wing down flat and then work on it, especially if you're going to do any textures or highlighting or shading. That's going to take a little bit of work. Or if the wing has scale patterns on it, or if it's got, other details that you want to be able to hit easily. So much easier to do that when you've got it in your hand as opposed to attached to the dragon. The other thing is really just that, as I said earlier, it makes the dragon just easier or harder to work with when you've got these huge wings attached to it. You're almost inevitably going to rub paint off at that point on something. You may inadvertently use the wings to kind of set the dragon on the table, and then the edges of the wings get rubbed off and everything like that. So just generally a pain in the tuchus. So that is why our dragon is currently wingless. He's very sad about that. We'll get to it. Maybe we'll get to wings next week, because I want to teach you guys some stuff about it. But otherwise, this can also apply to small figures. Like if you've got a barbarian who's got an axe and he's holding it across his chest and the arm is a separate piece, I usually hold off attaching that if I can't reach the breastplate or I can't reach the inside of the sleeve easily, things like that. So always think about that when you've got a model in separate pieces and you have to decide when to glue it and when not to glue it. Other considerations may be small pieces. Like if this dragon had separate horns, then I would probably attach them first, because they probably wouldn't keep me from hitting any details, and they're a small piece that I might lose otherwise. So that's something else to take into consideration. All right, so without further ado, we'll talk about dragon. And we'll talk a little bit more about painting black and keeping things interesting, because before, we were pretty much using an olive green to highlight all of the dragon. Oh, somebody is very nice and said, don't forget to congratulate Ann on hitting my first goal on Patreon, $500. Aw, you're very sweet. Thank you, Nebulosity. I was super excited. I get to buy some real studio lights, just like we've got here, for my actual home videos. So, before we were doing olive green, and I want to keep the dragon mostly that color. I think it's a great highlight color for black dragons. I'm just going to put a little bit of it on these scales here, just to start mapping it out. But there's another way we could go about doing this, and that is wet blending. So first we'll talk a little bit about surface control. So essentially what I mentioned to you guys last time is you want to keep most of the scale dark when you're working on it in order for the dragon to look black. This is true also if you take everything as a larger area. So if I were to blend this entire area instead of just working on individual scales and keeping the majority of the scale black, I could work on this whole area and some of the scales might be almost all dark green, but as long as the majority of this area was black, I'd be okay. It would still look like a black dragon. This is going to be even more applicable now because I think I'm going to make the upper part of this dragon a dark purple. So just to accent and kind of play off the green. So it's not all green, because we all know that when you're painting a dragon, whatever color is your main color is the color you never want to see again by the time you're done. So paint a dragon red sometime, you will never want to see red. Like for the next 6 to 12 months, you will not want to paint anything red. I guarantee it. It's just happened to somebody at Paint Club, so I have an actual example. So let's see here. So let's take this arm maybe, and we will do some wet blending. Wet blending is a technique where you are essentially smooshing two colors together on the model. A lot of you may know about two-brush blending, and it's kind of like two-brush blending with only one brush is how I pretty much had one of my friends talk about it. It's funny because two-brush blending is more known nowadays than just wet blending is, and so I always have to relate it to like the later technique, which is so funny to me. But then that's just how our technology tends to roam. So essentially, you use a fair amount of paint on your brush, and I'm using a big fat brush, big fat brush. So big, even a messy brush. Messy brush is fine for this. You want to use a brush that you can cover most of the surface with. It's a fair size. You wouldn't want to use something like this, which is my Dragon base coat brush, because you can't blend anything with this. It's just going to cover the whole surface. So you want something that takes up maybe a third of the surface that you're going to cover, because you want to be able to apply the paint fast and then apply the wet paint over the top. It's also helpful to do wet blending in sections. So if I'm going to do like the neck, I do it separately from the upper arm, and I do it separately from the lower arm. So let's put a bunch of black onto this upper arm, and then I'm going to grab some olive green, and I'm going to grab it with the same brush, and I'm going to figure out where my highlights go, and that's probably on the raised surfaces, right? Ooh, are we seeing cheers or are we subs? Subs!
Those
Yay!
are subs.
Kuraneko. Right? Kuraneko? Yeah.
Kuraneko, E-Dave, and
But
Brody.
anyway, thank you. Thank you for subbing. And Brody, 1759, thank you for subbing. That's super. So essentially, I'm just smooshing the two colors together on the dragon. And if I feel like I get too much green, because remember, a lot of this surface has to stay black for it to look black, then I'm just going to grab a little bit more black and kind of smoosh it in up there and blend it in. And also remember, though, that the darker the surface stays, the more it's still going to read as black. So I won't really get into trouble until I start introducing like really lighter green highlights. You can see the paint's kind of running together at this point, so it's definitely like having some, I've got maybe too much paint on the dragon, but this at least helps me demonstrate, so I'm going to do that. Now I will actually rinse my brush. I usually do not rinse my brush, but if I get too much paint on the dragon, I'm actually go and grab a second brush, maybe mix my black paint, put just a little bit of paint on it. You don't want to use just a bare brush because it's going to strip up paint if it's started to dry. But I just want to take a little bit of this extra paint off and be able to blend a little bit finer. So I'm going to come at it from this backside too. Kind of pull it down. And you can keep working as long as your paint stays wet, which is why it's good to work in small sections. Because as long as you're working in a small section, chances are your paint's going to stay wet for a good long time. The minute you start trying to do, like if I was trying to do this whole arm, while I was working down on his paw, this would also already start drying. So you can see a little bit of the green here as I tilt it toward the camera. Of course, the paint is wet. It's not pronounced. This is a technique that isn't going to give you like super sharp highlights, but what it does is it sets up a nice blend for you right away that you can then refine with layering. I'm trying to tilt him so you can see his nice. Yeah, we've got too much light. That's okay. I'm going to keep highlighting him, and once he dries, you guys will be able to see. I went back to our green from last time, which is swamp green with a bit of, swamp green is 9175. It's a great, vibrant, dark olive, and stained ivory, 9142. And I mixed those to get kind of an in-between phase. The reason I mix them is that when you're doing wet blending, you lose your sharpest highlight and your darkest shadow. So since you're mushing these two paints together, you're never going to get your pure green, because it's always going to have a little bit of black in it, and you're never going to get your pure black, because it's always going to have a tiny bit of green in it. So essentially, I wanted it to, my initial color, my initial olive, to do this, to be brighter than swamp. Otherwise, it wouldn't have looked you wouldn't have been able to tell, really. This is starting to dry now. That's when you have to stop. Oh, thank you, Kuronico. The focus is much better this week. Did you see that, Techie Man?
I did.
Yay. That's happy. Yeah, we worked. And look, my dragon has a piece of tape for his tail to anchor on, so he's always in the right position for you guys. So, okay, so you can see the paint is starting to dry now, especially on the top of the scales, it's starting to dry. That's when you gotta stop. If you keep going with wet blending, the minute you see it start to look even tacky, that's when you really risk stripping up your underlying paint and getting big globs of drying, semi-drying paint. And we don't want that. So at this point, I'm going to stop, I'm going to wait, I'm going to see how my blend looks, and then that's when I take my pure lighter olive color, and I can go in and I can just add some highlights just on the scale tips. Maybe I even leave most of this area black. I might just do a tiny little highlight, but it is on the underside of the arm. The nice thing about this position for Mr. Dragon is that this is the position he's actually fighting in. Like, he's going to be kind of like this when he's all attached to the base. So it lets me kind of keep an eye on where my shadows and highlights are. The highlight on this is definitely up here on the rounded arm, and the vertical surface only maybe gets highlights on the edges of the scales. So as it dries, you can see it's subtle, but it does give you, what it does do is give you a very fast setup. And it's more pronounced on lighter colors. I do a lot of this on wolves, where I will work with 9136 Walnut Brown and 9142 Stained Ivory. Those two colors mixed together make an excellent wolf color. So, and because you're working with one so dark and one so light, you can really get a wide transition instead of this more subtle dark olive to black transition. But it is a nice transition, and it did put a highlight on where I wanted it, and it was fast. So, I mean, if I was going to keep working, I wouldn't have futzed with this quite so long. I would just keep working on this and this and this. So let's actually do that. Let's actually try some purple and see if my idea to accent my greens with some purple is going to work. I was thinking I wanted to do this upper surface with purple highlights on my black. I might even do this and maybe the back here, and then kind of assess and see if I need it. Now what this does, if I'm going to do an alternate color, for my dragon, you can do this on any color of dragon, is it makes it a little more interesting, and you don't just freak out because all your painting is green or all your painting is blue. It lets you introduce an accent color on the dragons to kind of break things up, so you're not just staring at the green dragon of doom. Maybe you use a little reddish brown and make a line of reddish brown scales down the back of the dragon. Maybe just pick a color that goes well with it. With red dragons, I typically would choose a black or a really dark blue, because that tends to look really good with the red dragon. Blue dragon, I don't know, I might go with white. I might go with something that suggests lightning, something like that. Green dragons, you can go all over the place because, especially if it's a forest dragon, you can choose anything. So let's try some purple. And again, I probably would go with Styx purple if I was layering, which is 9423, I think. But because I'm wet blending, I need to go lighter, remember, to get the contrast. So I'm going to go with Runic Purple 9424. And I have not tried this in advance, so if it stinks, then we'll just have to paint over it. But that's the other great thing about working in small sections for this, is that we can paint over it with a minimum of effort. So I'm going to grab some of my purple. Maybe I want to put it at just the top of the black. And I probably want to put some at the bottom of the black, but I'm going to kind of put that up there. But yeah, when you're doing this, you could actually get a basic blend on most of this dragon, probably within an hour of work. And then go back and just, highlight individual scales where you felt like it. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush because these are smaller scales. I'm working on a smaller area than I was. Remember my rule of, has to take up about a third of the area, and that brush was almost the entire area of this set of scales. So you can see then why I mentioned that earlier. Always work with a slightly smaller brush than your surface. Now the more you smoosh, the more you're just going to get a kind of a purpley black. So that's why I tend to leave a little bit heavier of a purple, maybe not blended in perfectly. Let me see, make sure you guys can see this. Let me turn him a bit. I want to make sure the neck is in, and of course it's wet, so it makes it hard to see. But I'm going to just keep blending. I'm going to mostly hit the bottom part of each scale where the light would catch it. And I will go in and add a final highlight in runic purple at the end, but I just mostly want to get a start on it with kind of a blend. Remember that if you do go to rinse your brush out, always pick up some paint on it before you go back, even if you've got a lot of paint on the model, because if you go back with a bare brush, you risk stripping up paint. So there we go. So we're getting, yeah, that was a lot of black, so I'm going to have to come back. The purple is not as strong as the black, because the black is just really heavy pigmented. So even though the purple is pretty strong, purple pigments in general are just not as strong as with a black, up against a black. When you put purples in white, they tend to actually overpower white very quickly. That's because the quinacridone pigment that a lot goes into a lot of purples is a high dispersion pigment. What that means is when you add a little bit of it, it goes a long way when you're working with a color like white. So it disperses through the white very quickly. Unfortunately, though, the purple also, the quinacridone especially, tends to be somewhat transparent, so you're fighting that as well when you're trying to make it mix well and not lose its power. So sometimes you just have to go for that dot of pure purple. All right, so that's decent. I think a good start.
Hey, Rhonda said hi, by the way.
Oh, Rhonda said hi. Is she
Yes.
tuned in?
She is. Bird with a brush.
Oh,
That would be Rhonda.
I'm sorry, I've been bad about staring at the TVs. Thank you for coming, Rhonda. Yay, Rhonda's a pro. She does. Hopefully she'll get to stream some too with us. I hope we get lots of different painters streaming, because everybody brings something different to the party. I'm going to go in, and actually this is drying a lot faster, so I'm actually going to go in with some pure runic purple and just kind of hit the bottom edge, because I want to pick up a little bit more of that purple. And then we'll see how our black and our green look together. They're not real striking yet, but we can add higher highlights and pick up more of that color. Remember, we don't want that color to take over, though. It really is just green highlights versus purple highlights. So since they're only highlights, and we're just trying to give our black dragon a little bit of interesting depth to him, we don't want the purple to get too strong. We do want to be able to see it, but we don't want it to just scream purple. So we'll just pop in a little bit of a highlight there. You make sure you guys are, yeah, now you can start to see it. There you go. See? Pretty subtle. And that's why I can just go back and take my pure runic purple, 9424, which is a great color, and just kind of hit the top of each scale just a little bit. You don't need to be like real precise and blended with your spot highlights. You just need them to kind of, to kind of pop. That's why they're there. And the fact that you wet blended with this color first means that it's very easy to look as if you blended the whole thing instead of doing just a final spot highlight. So it's really a trick. Most of painting is tricks. Once you know the tricks, then it's just practice, and practice is fun. At least painting dragons practice is fun. I heard a burble. Ha!
Thank you, Psycho Cindy.
Are we fully scrolled down on our chat? Because I'm not, or maybe it's just not loading as fast.
It should be unless Collins
because I didn't see that alert.
It's possible that Collins is messing with it.
Oh, is that Psycho Cindy then? Well, thank you, Psycho Cindy. We very much appreciate it. This is our task to prove that this is awesome and we should do more of it to the bosses. So we really appreciate your support.
It may have been a follow, not a sub.
You're organizing your paint room, Rhonda. It's a boring chore, but it's kind of fun too, isn't it? You get to look at all the colors that you haven't used yet, and maybe the colors that you use too much of. Not that there's such a thing. There we go. So that's looking, yeah, you see those? Those are starting to pop out now. You see how the purple really plays off the green too? Now the key here also, and I'll talk a little bit about color theory here. Olive is a very muted green, right? It's got a lot of brown in it. It's not a pure green. So the thing is, if I use too bright of a purple, those two colors are going to fight. Because sometimes when you put a really bright color next to a really muted color, they don't really like each other. There's a way to get around this, and I used it with the eye, actually, and that's to do a complementary color, and that's why we started with kind of a base of red here. Red and green are complementary, and also the eye is very small. That's the other way you can get around it. You can use a bright color for a spot highlight on a muted colored model. As long as you keep it small, it'll work just fine. So those are some tricks that you can use and just some things to keep in mind. If you're trying to paint a model and your colors aren't working, kind of look at, have I put a bright blue next to a burnt orange? Maybe that's why this is really ugly, maybe I need to make my orange a little brighter and that'll work, or maybe I need to make my blue a little more gray or something, and maybe that would work. The other thing that works for you in getting those two, like a muted and a bright color, to work together is if you make contrast with light and dark, which we also used on the eye. We had a very dark green, a base of black, since we want this to look like a black dragon, and then we went very bright and light with the eye. And that helps it also to look good instead of looking like it's jarring. So the key here with the purple is I got to keep it small when I go to these bright purple highlights so that it won't fight with the olive green. So we didn't blend the olive green down here on the neck at all, so I need to get to that. Be a little bit of a repeat. Although I'll actually show you guys, since I just blocked that in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a glaze of black. And a glaze is kind of like a wash, but very, very thin. It's like putting a filter on a camera. You're trying to kind of just tint the area. You're not trying to change the color. And for me, what it also does is it blends in brush strokes. So it can be a quick, easy, one-stop way to kind of blend in your brush strokes. Downside is it will, it'll darken this area just a little. When you put on a glaze, brush it quickly across the entire area. Use a bigger brush if you have one. I have unfortunately reached for my same old brush. And then if you see excess, like pooling, like you would normally leave with a wash, take the tip of your brush, rinse it out, take the tip of your brush very quickly, and take that excess right off. Because you don't want this to pool. It is so thin that it won't dry in a good way, like a wash. It'll actually lift up and dry on the surfaces. In fact, if you're used to trying to mix your own washes and you have that problem a lot where it rings, we used to call it ringing, because it would creep up onto upper surfaces and dry where you didn't want it, then try adding a little more paint to your mix if you're getting ringing. And what that means is, why that happens, a little bit of paint chemistry for you all. Ringing with washes happens because you've actually broken the paint. You've broken the bonds between the resins that hold the paint together, and as a result, it can't hold together in the cracks. It just spreads. It just dries in a random haphazard patterns that are dictated more by fluid dynamics than more just random stuff, right? Dictated by surface tension more than anything. And so the paint doesn't hold together, and that's why adding more paint fixes that. Adding mediums also fixes it. Like a lot of people say, add matte medium or add Reaper brush on sealer. That's why that fixes it. You're adding more resins in, and it holds the paint together. So that's just a little bit of science for you today. So that essentially blended in my olive by making it more dark. I can also grab my black and kind of do a little bit of patterning, just making some lines here to break up the pattern where I got a little bit too blobby, because I'm going to want to kind of do little lines anyway. So I'm going to grab my green and come back in on these little green scales. And just kind of keep my highlights toward the edge of it, because again, we want the dragon to look black in the end. So the majority of every scale needs to look black or near black. It's called surface control, or at least that's what I call it. I've started calling it surface control, because what you're doing is controlling the amount of every surface that shows a particular color in order to get it to look the way you want it to. For example, ooh, that's a nice blob. See how I messed up there? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a spot wet blend. I'm going to grab black and blend that. I could do that because that was a big enough blob that it stayed wet. And I do this a lot. Anybody who's on my Patreon will see me do this a lot in videos. It kind of, in fact, doing videos for the Patreon kind of forced me to understand how often I spot wet blend when I do a layer and I don't like it. I see. Penciler polychromatic. All right, I'm here now. And start over from the beginning. No. Oh, Rhonda, saw your video and forgot everything you'd said. I do that so often. Oh my gosh. Like, you guys, if I like repeat myself a lot, yes, it's because, senior moment, I have totally forgotten what I said last time. But I figure there are a lot of you who are new also, so it doesn't hurt to repeat myself. And a lot of you have probably forgotten every little detail as well. So I figure it's not... Okay, so I'm going to illustrate something here. So I tried to do this highlight, and I got a very blocky brush stroke on this scale. Like just a solid line. It's really not a blend at all. This means my paint is too thick. So if you're trying to do blending with layering and you see this, even if it feels like you've added so much water to it, oh my gosh, how could it be so thick? Add more water. And the reason is that as you go lighter with your colors, you get colors of necessity that have more white pigment in them. White is the highest opacity pigment. It covers the best. A lot of you already know this just from playing with it. But a color that covers well doesn't want to layer well because you're trying to make it do something that's counter to its nature. You're trying to make it be transparent when it really doesn't want to be. See, now I went too far in the opposite direction. You may have to kind of play around. But in general, just add a tiny bit of water if you're seeing a lot of lines and brush strokes when you're trying to start blending. The other way you can kind of err is what I just did, is where I put on a layer and couldn't see it at all, right? You want to hit that sweet spot in between. And I did both when I was learning to layer. There we go. So this is the perfect sweet spot where I can kind of do these lines and they almost look blended just with me just drawing the line. I'm not actually doing any blending. I'm just drawing a line, but I have my paint consistency correct. So that means it looks naturally blended. And what is happening here is that as I start my stroke, you can't really see it because there's so little paint coming off of your brush. But as you draw down and then you lift up your brush, you're leaving a little puddle of paint there at the end, and that creates a blended brush stroke. Look, I can even accentuate that by going over and doing it a couple more times right at the end. So this is a more, there's a lot more painstaking, obviously, than doing the wet blending approach. But it also gives you much tighter work. And it lets you do things like subtle textures, like, making the scales look kind of liney like I am, bringing out the texture on those little scales. We'll talk a little bit more about texture on scales a little later if we have time. I kind of want to show you guys, since this is a dragon fight scene, I want to try to do some scratches and other damage on the scales. So we will get to it either this time or next time, depending on how this goes. But yeah, so I'm just pretty much, and I'm concentrating my highlights at the edges, the bottom edges of the scale, because the dragon is like this, the light is coming down like this, so this bottom edge, because the previous scale is overhanging this, so it's going to be dark. The bottom edge is going to get the highlight. And then I'm going to kind of make a note and see if I've gone too far, and maybe my dragon is starting to look more green than black. But so far I think this is pretty okay. We'll deal with this. We'll set it up. A lot of times when you're painting, let's see, highlighting black with pink. Pink is the new goth anyway, the new black, right, Ludo? Is that it? So, but yeah, it's actually not pink, it's actually purple, but it looks pink, and this actually plays right into this, what I was about to say. It looks pink because it's so light against the black. The black is making the runic purple look lighter than it is. Here, I'll show you guys the colors. So for my purples, I could have gone with Styx purple. Let's see, there we go. Styx purple, though, is so dark that it wouldn't have really looked like anything up against this black. You can see it even in the bottle. There isn't much contrast there, right? So instead, I went with runic purple, and I mixed it with the black for the wet blend. And then the last highlight is with that runic purple. So it is actually runic purple, but every time, are there really 50 shades of gray? Actually, I'm pretty sure there's like 1,000 shades of gray, but you really can't see like the differences between them. And it depends on if you're talking about digitally produced gray or pigmentally produced gray. Who knows? Let's see, where was I? All right, it's talking about how colors change relative to the things they're next to. Yay, this is a perfect segue. Thanks, Ludo. You gave me a perfect segue. Perfect segue is, just like we said there, if you put a medium color next to a very dark color, that medium color, like runic purple, because it's really not that light. If you look at it next to that white, there we go, ta-da, next to that white label. But a medium color like that is going to look significantly lighter when it's next to black. And you can do the same thing where if I put that color next to white, it would look like a dark purple or medium dark purple. So every time you paint something, I often will do kind of what I call a soft finish on a project and then go back and see if I need more highlights or shadows. And doing a soft finish means kind of like this. I'm blocking in basic highlights and shadows on an area, and then at the end, or at least when I've got a major area done, I'll kind of look at it and make the judgment call on whether I need more. Because until I finish all the areas around it, I may not be able to see if I need another highlight or not. I won't necessarily know. Especially this is true if, like me, I often will paint in sections like I'm doing on him, but when you have white primer instead of black, This can really mess up how things look because everything will look darker when you've got white primer still on the model. So you often won't be able to judge. You think, oh, I need another highlight on that. But actually you don't. You just need to like cover over the rest of that white primer, and then everything looks like natural, much more natural than you thought it did. All right, so I'm kind of liking our purple and green dichotomy we've got going on. I think I need to take my green a little lighter. I think maybe that the purple is a little bright for the green, but it may still carry. We'll see. If I need to dull it down, then that's easy. I can just glaze it with a bit of Stix purple and work it that way. That would dull it down and darken it a little bit because Stix has a lot of black in it. It's not as bright a purple. It is, however, a really pretty dark purple. So if you want to try a new dark purple, like if you're a fan of Nightshade purple, but you wish it was just a little lighter, try Stix. I think it's a really nice purple. So I'm just kind of edging here. And maybe we'll get to that. Let's see, what have I got on my list? Yeah, we can do battle damage. We can do battle damage. Why don't we use some scratches, scrapes, and abrasions? Let's see, just checking on here. I'm just making sure that I'm catching up with your discussion. Are there any questions, actually, before I go on and just randomly embrace a new subject? So if you guys have any questions for me about what I've been doing so far, feel free to ask. Oh, no, I blurfed. If I blurfed, it's easy. Also, never panic. Just go back and fix it. Especially easy to fix scales that you mess up when you're just doing them all like as you go down the dragon, because then you can just stop and correct it. There we go. So I'm pretty happy with that neck. That's pretty good. I may actually block in his underbelly too at some point, because that's going to be a lighter tan color. One thing you will notice that with the exception of the eye, I'm going to be keeping a pretty limited palette on this model. I like to repeat colors on a model. I think it makes it looks more coherent and like it belongs on the same thing. Question from Polev. Did it get answered? I did not see it, sibling. Can you repeat it for me? I'm getting a little into my painting today. But I would love to answer questions. Can you, what is it?
When would you use blending versus layering?
When would I use blending versus layering? I use wet blending when I want to set up an area quickly and it's a big area. So I would never use it on a head, for example, at least not one this small, but I will use it on bigger muscle groups. And what I really like to use it on are like setting up skin colors for like ogres and giants, because the separate muscle masses are usually pretty evident. And so it's a really good way to just lay down that initial mid-tone highlight shadow, and then I can go in and refine it. I like to use it on animals with fur texture, because the fur texture itself will help to make it look more blended because it breaks it up to your eye. Let me see. Oh, I should go in and actually finish highlighting the edges of that green area. So this is our green area. I'll take it and I'll highlight it a little bit more. Now my green is a little weak. So yeah, wet blending is good for big textured areas and large flat surfaces. It's also really good for capes. If you have a big cape and you're just daunted, capes are great places to practice layering, don't get me wrong, but they're also fantastic places to practice wet blending. And they do let you get that whole cape area kind of out of the way quickly. And then if your layering isn't as smooth as you wanted it, you can always do this. You can go back in and tune with your layering. So like here, my blending is dry. It gave me a good basis for the start. So now I'll go in and just add a little highlight to the tips of the scales to bring out my green a little bit more. Make it kind of look, you can see that it's yeah, see, there you go. So you can see the difference, right? Like where I've wet blended, obviously it's a lighter color underneath. You definitely get that idea that the entire upper surface here is kind of flashing green in like the light. Whereas up back here, it's very much an edging technique, and you're not seeing necessarily a highlight across an entire surface. You're seeing each scale come out. So it does give you a different effect. Even though I'm coming in and I'm doing my layering after the fact, I think sometimes that setting up big areas with wet blends gives you a more natural effect. Now I could go back, and if I really liked this effect, I could actually use glazing to try to bring some of this area out more. Just like I glazed with black earlier on, I could glaze with olive if I felt it was needed, like here on the shoulder, to kind of blend it in. So let's try that. I'm going to grab some of my olive, I'm going to thin it down, I'm going to grab my palette and try to show you guys my glaze consistency.
Evil Elvis also has a question, by the way, when you get a chance.
When you think of making custom tertiary colors to match other colors on the model. I'm not getting, explain custom, like mixing, hand mixing, or, I'm not quite getting the question. Let me see. I'm going to put Dragon down and get my palette up to show you guys glaze consistency. All right, so let's see here. Glaze consistency, like this is more a wash, but now that I'm throwing all this water in here, colored water, that is a glaze right there. That is so thin, you would never want to use it as a wash. It would break the minute you put it on a model and it started to dry. So a wash is darker than this, but the glaze, see how thin that is falling off the palette. This is more like a wash, maybe a little bit, maybe you'd want it just a tad darker than this, but just so you see. And here's all my, as far as custom tertiary colors to match other colors on the model. I still don't know what you mean by custom. Because these are all actually, these guys are custom colors that I've mixed out of my two basic starting colors, which is Russet Brown 9199 and Swamp Green 9175. So I actually didn't like that one, so I just ignored it. But I added more and more of the 9142 Stained Ivory to make my highlight colors for the green, and likewise for the brown. And I use a well palette so that I can actually thin these paints down to the consistency I want and control that consistency for long periods of time, which you cannot do on a wet palette. Wet palette, when you're working with very thin paint, you have to remix every brushful. So that is why you've got difference between those two. All right, let me grab some of this paint, try to glaze and make this dragon get a little bit more cohesive here, since I've got this nice faded area here. I think that might not have been so strong. But the thing with glazes, guys, and lighter glazes especially, I want to pull it out of the cracks here. I do not want it in the cracks. So I grab my brush, rinse it out so that it's just damp, and I pull that out. And then I see if that's enough color. But with glazes, it's better to do a glaze that's really light and have it not be light enough and have to put on another glaze than to put it too heavy, because then you've essentially, you can't take it off if it's too heavy. You can always add another layer. You can't take it off. So as in neutralizing blue with orange to make gray that matches the blue you've just used. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. To create a color that will go with the color that you just used. Okay. Rather than matches. That was my, so like, almost like utilizing a little bit of one color in every mix. Okay, so there's two ways. That's an interesting idea. So I could actually show that. I don't do it. Even all of us, I don't do it very often because at this point, I can pretty much take 12 paints and create any color in Master Series from 12 paints just when I'm on vacation. So I don't often have to do that, I guess. If I want a gray that matches a blue, I usually know exactly how to mix that gray. But you have a point. One of the things that this touches on is, guys, like say that you're picking a random color to highlight another color with. Say that you have a darker blue and you want your lighter blue to go with it, but they're from different triads and you don't know if they match and yada yada. The way to get past that is to mix a little bit of your darker blue into your lighter blue. What he's talking about is doing that except to an extreme level, where if you want a gray color that matches your blue, you could choose to mix the complementary color of orange into that. It'll make a gray or a brown. You got to be kind of careful with it. But hypothetically, that blue is still in that mix, and so it will go with its original version. A little bit, if you want any other color to match a particular color or to go with a particular color, adding a little bit of that particular color will help. And that's a very general rule, and there are lots of ways where you can get in trouble that way. So I think that I think that mixing complementaries to create neutrals custom, I'd be more likely to just choose a gray that already is a pure neutral with lots of black, with black and white and not anything else, and then add a little bit of that blue or that whatever just to make it harmonize a little bit better. I'd be more likely to do that. But on the other hand, I might add a little bit of the complement instead to make it contrast, because the thing is that as you take a color and you add more, as you're trying to make other colors that go with it, you also, as you draw closer to that color that you're using, you also lose contrast unless you go very light or very dark. And contrast is what mini painting is all about. So, very complicated question. Very good one though. Let me see here. Let's go more into color theory. I'll have to do something where I mix complements. I'm not really set up to do it now. So that actually helped. You guys, it's hard to see, but that glaze actually did take down the black a little bit. I think I'm going to do another layer on those upper scales and blend it in a little bit better. Boom. And again, I'm going to rinse out my brush. My pants are my paper towel, I'm afraid, when I'm in a hurry. And just kind of touch it very lightly to those cracks, that area in those cracks where you want to take that paint out of there. You do not want it drying all haphazardly. You want to control it. So I think that mostly did it. Boop. Let's try to get those last little bits out of there. A tiny bit isn't probably going to kill you, but you don't want any big puddles. So that'll fuzz it a little bit. It's still, you can see it's slowly coming up, but it's still not as soft and it's still not as soft looking as our wet blend. So that's actually a very nice effect. And in retrospect, if I had tried that first, I might have continued it over the entire thing. I thought about trying to do that. Actually, let's do that on the wing bit, and then we can talk about battle damage. I need to set up some scales for battle damage, though, so let's see here. Probably easier to do this on a dragon that's not black, but, you know, let's just run with it. I'll just block in some green scales over here, because it'll be a little bit easier to show you on a scale that is not pure black. Show you the kind of thing that I would do. So let's just say we're starting with a swampy green dragon. Or maybe we use some olive as our, instead of going purple, maybe we decide to do some solid olive as our accent color. You could totally do that, actually. If you decided you wanted to break up your black dragon and you're already using an olivey color or any color to highlight the scales, you could just do some scales in that color, solid. And it would go with what you're already doing, because you're using the same color. Oh, good. I'm glad that helped, Evil Elvis. Good. So since you're using the same color, it doesn't like hurt anything. It doesn't disrupt or clash. So you could do a whole line of solid olive scales to kind of break up some of this area. You could do a couple of them and see if they worked well. So all right, there we are. And I'm going to just highlight these scales a little bit more, and then once those scales are dry, which should be almost instantaneous, that is the advantage of working with thin paint, is that it dries right away. Let me see, got to get gotta angle Mr. Dragon so I can see him, although this is a better position this week, that's for sure. So you guys might notice that, that I am doing little dots and lines as I get to the end of these scales, and that is kind of to suggest some texture, as if the scales are not like totally smooth and just rectangular. There we go. I probably needed a bit more back there, but you get the idea. All right, so that's some highlighting done. All right, so let's look at that. Actually, I kind of like that line of dark olive scales. So all right, so if you're going to do battle damage, like he's fighting a dragon, so obviously he's going to have some chips, and you know, maybe Justin puts in some commands. I agree. Nope. Oh, hi Rex. Nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Rex Grange in chat, one of our ReaperCon instructors, paints awesome fire giants. All right. So the first thing we'd probably want to do is make some cracks and dents, and we would most likely use a dark color for that. I might use black, but I think I'm just going to mix some of my olive green with the black, because we don't want it to just like stick out like a sore thumb necessarily. And I'd probably use let's see, let's just put a scratch across this wing. I don't want it to necessarily stick out like a sore thumb. I'm going to put like some, maybe a chip there. And the great thing with bones, guys, is that you can absolutely just take your knife and gouge this. If you want it to be real, you can do that. So there's a jagged tear. That's a scratch. And if you did this across several scales, you could just make a big scratch that ran across several scales also. Little battle abrasions would be like little dots, like more like maybe a bit of acid breath weapon got peppered his side or something. This scale's a little small to carry that, but you get the idea. This is all the same thing that, by the way, that you would use like if you were doing battle damage on armor or a tank or anything like that. So our dragons are a lot like tanks. They're more like tanks than we thought. So there we go. So a little bit of extra texture there. So maybe this scale, yeah, maybe this scale got abraded by something or got hit by a special attack or some sort. And so it made lots of little pits and dents in it. There we go. We'll do that. So you have to remember, what's important is to remember kind of where your light is coming from, because that's going to dictate kind of where your highlight shows up. And that's how you get this to look three-dimensional. Once you've mocked in your damage, you take a highlight color, which will be, in this case, the olive green mixed with white, or in this case, more of my stained ivory, because that's the way I'm going. And you want to highlight that bottom edge. And you want it to be a pretty thin highlight, so I'll go back with my color and probably blend that in a little bit. Let's see if that dries and that fit actually blends in, or if I have to go and do more futzing with it. Sorry, just adjusting here, grabbing, there we go. So see how that little light space, oh, let's see, make sure you guys can see it. Checking my camera, trying to make sure. Problem again is lighting, is sometimes you lose it. All right. So you want to highlight the underside, because as light falls down, it's going to hit that and accentuate your little gouge there. If you wanted, I mean, you could do like, if you had done this across the entire hide, you could even have drips of blood like coming out of it. Things like that. Awesome effects. Use your imagination. If you want your dragon covered in gore, you can do that. I am not here to stop you. Conversely, if he's more like this and the light is coming like that, then I'd want to kind of highlight a different edge. Highlighting a different edge will make the light look like it's coming from this direction. So you see where you highlight, whichever edge is your lower edge to pick up the light, that's what's going to dictate where your light is kind of coming from on this model. On this guy, these guys, you would essentially try to dab under each of your little pits or scratches. I'm doing some very small stuff here, I know. Bear with me. But that makes, let's see. How's that coming across, Justin?
It's coming across well, actually.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So essentially what you're suggesting there is pits, and then as the light comes down, it catches the lower edge of each of those abrasions. More or less. That's more or less how you do it. So yeah, and then you could always brighten it up more if you really feel like it. The brighter you make that edge, the brighter, the shinier your surface is going to look, actually. So why not make commands? See, I think what we need for Justin to do, guys, is we need a exclamation mark brushes command, which will tell you automatically what brush I tend to use, you know, and maybe we should have a paints used command that would bring up a couple of colors that I'm using, things like that. I think that would be a great idea, Justin. Rhonda, love your hair video. My only complaint is that it was too short. Yell at them for rushing you. Oh, Casmania, I feel that so much. So much. I always feel like I don't get enough time. That's why I wanted to do this. That's why I wanted to stream, because it would actually give me enough time to like really demonstrate a bunch of stuff for you guys. Instead of being held to like, oh, can you make it 10 minutes? Which is great, right? Shorter videos, definitely. Short specific videos are definitely useful. But for a complicated topic, stuff like this is really useful. So I totally feel that. We'll yell at Ed for you. All right, so yeah, So that's some kinds of battle damage. Like I said, the great thing with bones is you could also just take a knife and vary the tip of a sharp knife and just gouge in the edges of some of your scales to suggest that stuff too. So that's another way that you could do that. Let me check us on time here. Oh, okay. So it's only been an hour. Man, I need to paint more dragon. Let's try to wet blend some purple up here. That sounds good. I kind of like my purple, I think. I was thinking purple here. I guess I should do green here, though. What do you guys think? I kind of like this. I kind of like this solid olive band of scales. I'm thinking about doing another one. Kind of think it makes a nice contrast. Maybe I'll try one up here.
Here we go, Ann. I put a brushes command in.
You put a brushes command in?
I did.
And
I think you'll like it.
is it just ask Anne what brush she uses?
No, I would never do that.
Yeah, right. That's totally what you did, isn't it? Because this is Justin, we understand. Yep. Anne uses brushes, ask her which ones. Ha ha. Yep. I totally had you. I nailed that. I knew exactly what Justin would do. That's kind of scary, actually. I'm going to put in a solid olive one up here. Solid olive section. If I decide I don't like this after a while, all I have to do is paint over it. It's the great thing about acrylic paint. Especially if you just keep your experiments fairly small in scale, you can always paint over the area. If you decide you don't like it. It's as simple as that. Let's see here. Yeah, I do kind of, I don't know, jury's out. I liked it down there. I don't know if I like it up there. Oh yeah, you do want to check out the, you do want to check out our first episode because I talk about some different stuff when I was setting up Mr. Dragon. So there are definitely topics that I covered in that video that, or that stream that I did not cover this time. You will get some repeat of necessity. I think I'm going to just go over that with black. I think I want to just not keep that. Although at this point it can almost wet blend it because it's still wet. But yeah, do check out the first video. I talk about stuff. Different stuff than I talk about here. You won't get all the stuff unless you watch all the things. Needs to be a lick command. No, I am not a brush licker. I broke myself of brush licking, and I'm not going to take it up again. It took a long time to break myself of brush licking. But I do not consider it a healthy habit. Therefore, I stopped doing it. All right, let's do. Yeah, I want to put some purple in down here, but I don't know if there's a place for it, so we may actually just be stuck on green from here on. I am going to try something, though. I'm going to do a slightly darker tone first, and then come back in with the edge highlight, and see if it makes my dragon too olive, or if it still looks like it's black. We're just going to keep going on our scales. I don't remember if I gave you guys brush control tips last time, by the way, but dragons are really good for brush control. They're really good for building it because you're doing so many scales, and if you're doing a dragon that's not black, you may even be like putting lining, like dark shadows between the scales. So repetitive motion is a great brush control builder, and essentially the spotted painter brush licking thinks he's at least 80% paint at this point. If you are what you eat, wow. Don't tell anybody else that. Some miniatures company might mine you for your interior. They might say, "Oh, we need a new paint line." Maybe it's that guy. But yeah, so doing brush control, and I'm kind of violating my own rules right now, but then I already have pretty good brush control. So if you are painting a dragon, use this opportunity to attempt to increase your brush control. You want to essentially keep doing the same brush control, same brush stroke like I'm doing here. You want to make sure that your hand is really relaxed, your brush hand is really relaxed, and that you're not varying your stroke and doing a lot of this. You want to keep your stroke consistent. And so essentially, if you keep your hand relaxed and you keep your stroke consistent and you do this, moving the model around instead of doing this, that lets you build brush control. And the reason dragons are so good for this is that there are so much of them. Spotted paint blue. That sounds too much like plaid in a bottle, like it's spotted in a bottle. That's another thing. You know, if I did that, you'd all think it was broken because you'd paint it on and you'd see spots. But yeah, so dragons are great for brush control because you are doing a lot of the same sort of thing, i.e. scales. You are doing it for a very long time, so you may as well get something out of it, i.e. brush control. Now I'm coming in with my lighter green, which is a mixture of swamp green, which is our my base green of 9175, and a mixture of that and my stained ivory. Stained ivory is like one of my unsung hero paints that I absolutely adore and that I think is somewhat underrated. If you ever need a highlighting color and you don't want to use pure white because you don't want a pastel, but you want something a little bit more muted, or you're already working with a muted like green or a blue or purple or anything, this is not a bad color to use. It'll bring your colors up. It's not going to fight you on blending because it doesn't have as much white pigment in it as a pure white does. That's actually looking pretty good. I'm just looking at my dragon on the camera going, oh, I guess it's not that bad. So you can see, by the way, this is an interesting effect. So here, where I started with almost the pure swamp green, and now I'm putting in higher highlights, looks a lot like this part where I wet blended back here on the camera. And then this middle line where I just edge highlighted appears darker. So that's a direct example of surface control. I'm using the same darn color paints, I'm using the same brush stroke, but the amount of surface on each scale that I'm covering and with what is different. So this still looks like each scale is picked out because I'm just layering edges, even though I'm using the swamp green along with the lighter highlight. This looks more soft and blended because we did that wet blend underpainting. And then this is just kind of like it is up here. So there is an example of how same technique, same colors, but different amount of the area covered with the color really can change the look of something. I kind of like it, but he's definitely looking like a greener dragon down here. You see, guys? That's why if you want him to look black, we have to shrink those highlights. I don't think I want to do the black glaze again. I think I'm just going to thin down some black and go back in and darken some of my scales. Because I actually like the wet blending area, and if I do a black glaze, it's actually I'm gonna lose that nice soft highlight. So I don't want that. I want to keep it around. I'm kind of fond of it. In fact, I may wet blend the rest of this dragon, just because it seems like I got something good going on there. Any questions? Any questions? Hello, Sigwolf. I am just trying to fix something I did with Mr. Okay, that works. So see, I moved the dragon around, even though it was kind of awkward for Mr. Dragon. Now he's like on his face, and he's definitely not happy about that, but he's just going to have to suck it up and deal with it while I fix his scales. Yay! All right. So I'm gonna, essentially, this is what you can do to fix your layering. If you're coming back at it, if you got your highlight too sharp or too bright, or you covered too much of your area with it, take your shadow color, and instead of pulling out toward the outward edge, we're gonna take our brush, point it that way, and pull toward the shadow. And I've got black on it here. And I want to unload my brush a lot because I want to actually be able to control it. Remember that when working with thinner paint, make sure you get most of your paint off the brush before you start laying it down, or it will pool and blob and it will want to run places. This is why a lot of people get frustrated with layering, I think, is that they use either too big of a brush for it, or they don't unload their brush as much as they should. You really want to be able, here's on my thumb, see those lines? You want so little paint on your brush that you can draw lines like this. Tiny, thin that is controlled paint. There's nothing pooling there. I can absolutely control these brush strokes. I can put the paint exactly where I want them. This, much more haphazard. Too much paint on my brush. Usually I do this sort of thing on my palette, but since you guys are here, I figured I may as well paint on myself to show you. I did a lot of that at my workshop over the weekend. This weekend I was teaching a 2-day workshop in Napa, California. Big thanks go out to Michael Kleiman, who is also a ReaperCon instructor, who offered up his domain for us to use for the class. It was fantastic. He has a pizza oven out back, like an actual clay-built brick pizza oven. It's fantastic. And it was a great class. I had 10 students, and for 2 days we worked on a bust. It was really fun. You are not a fan of Reaper or Anne, not at all. Well, I guess I'll have to work harder then. I just enjoy when she's at the store and I can get help. Yes, yes. I know, I'm too busy for that a lot of the time, but often you can summon Anne by sending a store employee back into the paint department. And if the paint is not eating me, or I am not wrestling with paint demons, I can indeed be persuaded to come out and help you. All right, so there, blending him in a bit. So see where I added all that black? You can really see where it's wet. And now that looks a lot more black, like a black scale. See how just doing that made the dragon look more black? There you go, surface control. See, because that now looks a lot more like this. So we are back to having a nice dark dragon. Now, what'll be interesting is, I could go even darker with this, right? I could say, well, he still looks a bit olivey. But remember that whole thing about colors changing because of what they're next to. What I really need to do is paint the rest of this, soft finish everything, and then put the dragon on and see, does he look black or does he look dark green? And then adjust. Because the other dragon's probably going to be a lighter color, and the groundwork I'm planning to be a lighter color, probably a reddish, a combination of red and bluish gray stone, maybe. I was thinking about doing that. So I know that this is going to be darker than anything else on the overall constructed model. So even though he looks dark green now, he may end up looking black when I put him on there. Oh, I see. You're long distance. Yeah, it is hard to drive up a lot when you're an hour away. Although I bet all the people who are 1,500 miles away are going, bye Rex. Are going, dude, 1 hour is totally okay. Let's see here. What do I want to do? Oh yeah, I wanted to tackle this right here. Just got a little bit too much green there. Also, if my wet blended scales, if I feel like they're starting to run together a bit, I think because I'm just smooshed them, so that means the black lines between the scales have been taken down a bit here. If I want those black lines to come back, then I just use a bit of lining with black paint, and I do that. Again, I'm going to move to where my brush angle is comfortable, and that's going to let me control my hand a bit more so that I can hit those nice lines. Lining between scales like this is a great exercise for building your brush control. So it's nice big areas. For the most part, the scales kind of guide your brush, so you don't have to try too hard. And you can just add in some darker lines if you feel like you want them. A little bit of delineation. Calmly painting a dragon. We'll just call this the Zen dragon, because he's totally giving me Zen right now. It's relaxing to paint little dragon scales. See, my hand got uncomfortable there, and I'm like, no, gotta move the dragon. Move the dragon. I missed that scale. There we go. Oh, he's a little bit, now we got a little bit more separation between our scales. Mr. Dragon returns to you. Rawr, he says. Let me just check his light sourcing. Yeah, that's not bad. Cool. I think I'm probably gonna actually cover up, well, I like that line of scales though. I'm not sure it's in the right place. So I am gonna wet blend over it, and then maybe I'll decide where else I want that sort of solid line, because I like that solid line of scales. But But I also am going to have some purple, so I have to factor that in. Maybe I should wet blend my purple and then make my call. I'm going to wet blend this top row of scales to be purple. I'm going to need to use a slightly smaller brush because it's a very fine line of scales. Let's see what I've got over here. Brushes, 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 brushes.
What sizes would those be in?
All right. I use, for the Reaper Kolinsky brushes, which are the black-handled Reaper brushes, I use an 05 and an 10 most often. The 0 would be a good one to use for wet blending this. Right now I've got a non-Reaper brush in my hand. It's a Raphael 8408 series, I think. And it's a size 1. It's actually pretty big for a size 1. Ones are typically not this long. But I think that it'll be a good brush to try that blend with. So I'm going to try that. Actually, I need more black on my plate. So hold on, Mr. Dragon. Sit here, entertain our viewers for a second while I put more black on my palette. Sigwolf, you totally need to come to ReaperCon. It's going to rock so hard this year. Like, I am so looking forward to ReaperCon. So, no contest there.
We can even take pictures of the stuff while he's there.
Offer photo assistance, yes. Come to ReaperCon, and we will make up for the fact that you could not buy your new camera. I'm going to remember you said that, Collins. Oh, you already have. Oh, Forever Night already has VIP ticket. Nice. Very nice. So are there any class subjects that you guys wished, my Twitch community, that you guys wished we offered at ReaperCon that we don't have yet? That's a question for you. Like, you went looking for a class on X and you couldn't find it. Or you went looking for a class on X and it was already sold out, so we should have offered more of it. I'm going to fill in these top scales with black. I'm just going to do a few of them at a time because with wet blending, you want to keep your area limited. As I mentioned at the front of this, you want to keep it limited because you have limited time to work. So then I'm going to come back in with my purple, start kind of smooshing it in toward the top of those scales. Basic skin tones, all the classes. Yeah, thanks. Basic skin tones. Ah, did we not have a basic skin tones class or was it sold out? I'm going to highlight this a bit. Blending, layering, and glazing class. Do you like my class? Yes, I am teaching that. That's one of my favorite subjects to teach. Yeah. But basic skin tones is, I mean, it is that, but it's also highlight placement. So, I mean, layering and glazing will teach you how to tackle skin, but it won't teach you where to tackle skin necessarily. I think that's the best way to put it. Meaning, you know, where to put things on skin to do better skin. Yeah, I'm sure that there are a bunch of classes we wish we had more space in. Sadly, a lot of the instructors, you know, we give our instructors control of what they want to teach. And, you know, it's no fun for some of us if we have to teach 4 of the same thing. Plus, it's kind of a gamble. Because often, when some of us in the past have taught more than one session of a subject, it might not sell as well. So it's kind of a big gamble to offer too many of one particular class. And it changes, too, every ReaperCon. As far as what's popular, like some years it's just like, oh my God, basing. And then we get a bunch of basing classes the next year and they don't sell at all. So there was one basic skin tones and it sold out within the first 2 hours. Oh, first few hours, okay. I will keep that in mind, that maybe we need a few more of those. Yeah, and the other thing is, as instructors, a lot of us have taught, like, say, you know, a class for years, and then it just stopped selling particularly well, so we stopped teaching it. But now we have a whole bunch of new people at ReaperCon. We sometimes don't stop and think, oh, wait, I could go back to teaching my old class again, because there's a bunch of people now who haven't taken it. So, you know, it never hurts to give these feedback bits, because then maybe we can fulfill need, at least maybe next year. It might be too late for this year unless we get some evening classes set up, but I'm not a big fan of the evening classes. for myself, like as far as me teaching one. All right, so purple on top of the dragon. Yeah, just a little bit of purple up there on top. Looks pretty good. Kind of thinking maybe I should carry that down right here. You know, because I don't have to stick to any particular pattern for my purple. I can just randomly decide to put a stripe of purple scales and see if it looks good. And Dragon Ecology does not say that I must put my contrasting scales in a particular way. Except it does kind of say, if they're at all like lizards, that it should be symmetrical on both sides of the back. That's how lizards are. I'm going to wet blend that scale. What time are we at, Mr. Collins? Or Mr. Justin, I should say.
2:46.
All right. So we are 15 minutes from end of show. And I want to ask you guys if you have questions. I think next show I'm going to cover wings. And that'll be next week. Wednesday at 1:30. Same bat time, same bat channel. I'm dating myself by using that. Oh yeah, chibi class. Hopefully we'll have some more of those. Chibis being so very popular and Reaper having some now. It would be nice. Yeah, do put your Twitch names on your badges at ReaperCon so that your Twitch buddies can find you. That would be fantastic. And then I'll know who you are too, because hopefully they'll let me keep doing this and I'll recognize you guys from the chat. That would be super awesome. Oh, I did want to close and tell you guys where to find me on Patreon if you want to. Definitely not necessary, but I do very targeted videos on my Patreon and also PDFs about color theory. And it is patreon.com/paintingbig. And as somebody was nice enough to point out earlier, I just hit my first ever Patreon goal, which is so awesome. And I did a thank you video for my patrons. So thank you for those of my patrons who are watching. I appreciate you so much. You make me happy every day. All right. Just blending in some more purple scales since I decided to do a bunch there. I kind of like that I put it there. It kind of balances having purple over here too. I got a little bit maybe heavy-handed with this scale, so I'm going to take my black and do that reverse layering stroke to kind of thin it down a little. So kind of like that. But I'm liking this purple and green thing. I think it's still going to end up looking like a black dragon. And I think it makes it a more interesting black dragon, which I like. I could also even bring these up another level and use the pink skin tone that I used for his tongue and his ear to do just a tiny edge highlight on the tip. Actually, let's try that. We've got a few minutes left. Oh, Bonsylvanians are totally chibis. Yeah, I expect a lot of people with Twitch names have the same as their forum names. I totally get that, Silverthorn. Wings. Yeah, wings are terrible. Oh, no. I mean, wings are awesome. Okay, so yeah, the only reason I say wings are terrible is because I spent years painting Sophies. So now I see a set of bat wings and I break out in hives. But I've mostly gotten over. Oh, thank you, breast cancer. Thank you for breast cancer awareness pink. Yay, of course. It's also just generally a very useful pink. It's a cold pink. It's a cool pink. It's not a warm pink. We used to make a warm pink too for a special edition called Bubblegum Pink. Yeah, we haven't quite made enough colors to have a paint ball pit, and I think also it would hurt because those caps can jab you. So, you know, I might not do that, but, you know, if you're into it. Pronounced your name Silverthorn, right? Yeah, I know you should fall over in shock because I mispronounce everybody at ReaperCon. But I decided to go to simple with your name. Because I'm like, well, I could try to pronounce it with all those AEs, or I could just, you know, pronounce it. Possibly because my last name has the OE and everybody starts to try to get fancy with it, and it's really just Forster. Really. So So I'm putting some of that fleshy tone, a little bit of that fleshy tone, the fleshy pink tone that's on his ear and his tongue, just along the bottom edge of those scales, just to see. That fleshy pink tone, by the way, is also an underrated color. Bright Skin Shadow. It is very pinky. It is fantastic for blushes and things like that on skin tones. It is a lovely, lovely color for highlighting pinks and reds for tongues and ears and things like that. I originally did the Bright Skin Triad to make it look more like, to seem cartoony. Just kind of wanted to make a pink, orange, and yellow skin triad. But these days, Bright Skin is one of my more favorite skin colors, and this shadow I use all the time. If you mix Bright Skin Shadow into reddish purples, it makes a fantastic highlight. So totally go for it. There we go, we got that. Popping, see how that popped a little bit more now? We can see that more. So I'm going to actually add it along this line of scales too. We got about 10 minutes left. Cherry Blossom Colored Mecca. The breast cancer awareness pink? Yeah. Black Indigo. Sigwolf, if I have any chance at all, if we do another Kickstarter, I will make a Black Indigo Triad. Because I love that sucker. I use it all the time. And the only way for me to put a color in the line right now is to release it as part of a Kickstarter, where it automatically goes into the core line afterwards, because the item number succession. So, I mean, I might be able to talk Ed into releasing like it as a box set, but I'd much rather have it just in the core line for, you know, forever. So, yeah, Black Indigo is wonderful. I was thinking about, I have to figure out really quick now what the ReaperCon Triad colors are going to be. And last time I said maybe some new clear brights, and people seem to really like that. Do you guys still like that idea? Because I've also got, I've got some other colors that might be really cool that I've been working on just for myself. Because I have this habit of starting a project and going, I need this green, and making a gallon of it. Oh no. Yeah, get me in trouble, even more in trouble with Spotted Painter. That's right. I said if, huge if. Yeah, right. I thought Ron already spilled the beans with his enigmatic pronouncement anyway, you know, like he's hinting at all sorts of new things. He's very bad at keeping secrets. But I honestly don't know. I don't know what we're doing. I get buried in the paint department, and I don't get in any of those meetings anymore, which is nice, because then I don't have to worry about them. You want more clear brights in the main range. A super secret future project. Yeah, I have no idea what the super secret future project will be. Kickstarter paints, will they be available at ReaperCon this year? They should be released by then, Valthorn. At least I should hope so. I don't actually have a release date on them, but now that we've fulfilled the Kickstarter, Ron usually wants to put them in production pretty fast. We've got the stock for them, so I wouldn't see why we wouldn't. You would be happy if the ReaperCon paints were clears? All right. I'll take that under serious consideration then. I do have a couple of them prototyped, and they're very pretty. I have an orange and a phthalo green. The phthalo green is I think, one of the most beautiful pigments we use. So I would love to have that make around. And I have an idea for the third one. It might actually be a non-clear clear. I might do one of the earth pigments if I do it. That would be kind of fun. Spotted Painter, people have been trying to clone me for decades, okay? I cannot tell you how many jokes I have been through with the whole, we should clone you and put you in a cage and make you paint our armies. No one has yet succeeded. Don't take that as a challenge. I would be very sad if I were cloned. I have too much empathy. I would feel sad for my other selves. There we go. All right, so we, highlighted all those little purple scales with that fleshy tone, which is going to actually make those purple scales look more like they belong because it's going to echo the color we used here in the ear and on the tongue. So yay for us. And look, we made really decent progress on Mr. Dragon. He's looking pretty good. And I think I'm going to keep those olive scales. I think I'll just probably take some of the battle damage off and paint them normally just to see how they look as a solid line. Or maybe I'll keep them like that. Who knows? Anyway, okay. 5 minutes. Do we have any? So mark you down for 3 phthalo greens. I'll make sure I make a good amount of these so that you guys can buy extra for friends and future. And, maybe I can talk Ed into a 6-color set or something of clear brights or an 8-color set in the future. All right, any questions? Down to our last. Did I use a primer on that dragon first? Hi, Red Hulk. Thanks for the question. I actually just painted it with black. With bones, I tend to not like using primers. I know there are some primers that you can use, but often it's fraught with peril to figure out which ones. And bones takes paint really well if you just wash it first. So I just usually grab the bones, throw them into a big mixing bowl with hot water and a little bit of dish soap, smoosh them around, and let them dry. Rinse them and let them dry on a paper towel overnight. And that's usually all I need to just get the paint to just stick. Like, it's pretty good. I'm getting a tiny bit of rub off here on the edges, but I can touch that up. And I expect that off of models. I mean, if it's a big model, you're handling it. What I usually, actually that gives me, yes, yeah, totally Red Hulk. Check out the first episode because but that's when I started doing this guy. What was I going to say? Dang it, I got derailed. Oh no, Twitch chat has derailed me. I think that's your job anyway, right, Twitch chat? I'm trying to think. And I totally had a point, and then I didn't. Oh yeah, I remember. So, if you're working with a big heavy model and you don't want paint to rub off, one way, I've been invaded. I've been invaded by Ron Hawkins.
Hey, there's a big announcement tomorrow. Did you know that?
Oh, have you been watching me not unveil your announcement that I knew nothing about?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I knew nothing about it, so I might have mentioned it accidentally. Because,
big announcement.
Big announcement
Just
tomorrow.
in case you didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know. I totally didn't know.
Okay. All right.
So, but when tomorrow, Ron?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. tomorrow.
On what channel? What show? What?
Oh, I don't know. That Reaper Live thing you do? Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. And they love you in the chat, Ron. They're like, Ron. He's sending you kisses, guys. Nice tan, Ron. Oh, boy. All right. So, yes, if you are handling a big model and you do not want to rub paint off, what I will usually do is I will get bubble wrap to hold it. When I was painting my big Soldier 76 Overwatch statue, I was using bubble wrap to cradle him, so I didn't rub paint off. So and you want to use not the stiff bubble wrap, but kind of the cheaper, really soft bubble wrap. I've got a roll of it. That way you can just kind of gently hold the model and you're not getting your oils from your fingers on the model, which is one of the things that helps to rub off the paint. And you're also holding it on a non-slip surface because the bubble wrap is kind of like sticky cling wrap almost, so model typically won't slide on it. You can also just, kind of use it to wrap your hand around the model without like your pressure rubbing off a lot of paint. So bubble wrap, it is your friend when painting gigantic models. All right, latex style gloves. I don't know, I've never used them. I like bubble wrap just because the air gives you a softer grip also. Like the fact that there's a cushion between your grip and the model, especially when working with big metal or resin, which tends to rub off really easy. Do I ever use a mini holder? Yeah, when I'm painting little models, I use mini holders constantly. I've got a whole bunch of them. I mean, usually it's just a pill bottle. It's filled with bad minis that needed to go to jail or pennies. I've got a couple of nice ones. I forget who did the wooden ones, but I've got one of those. I really like it. It's really comfortable to hold. And I've got a 3D printed one that Rohan from Paint Club printed for me, and it's really cool. It's got a magnet that holds it down on a stem that you can hold. It's pretty neat. I know you can 3D print a lot of different ones that are kind of cool. But yeah. Oh, Rathcore. Yeah. Yep. Stephen Rath. Yep. Yeah, I really like that mini holder. I like it because it's kind of spindle shaped, so it's really comfortable to wrap my hand around. All right. I think that's it, guys. Wait. Washing model and then brown liner. Oh yeah, that's another thing, the brown liner tip. If you're going over bones, it's essentially counts as underpainting. So you're putting a layer of a very dark brown over your gray or white, and that helps you get the shadows. think Justin is taking us away.
Yes.
That was his cue that I need to shut up. Hi, guys. All right. So this is Mr. Dragon. This is where we ended up. Next week, I will work on wings. Yeah, wings. We'll talk about all sorts of different tactics to make wings less boring and tips for fast speed painting if you want boring wings and you just don't want to do anything that's too work intensive, right? All right. We're not lazy. We are efficient. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day or night or morning, depending on when you're watching this, YouTube viewers. And we will see you next week. This has been Ann Forster for Reaper Toolbox Live.